For centuries, the story of Joshua and the conquest of Canaan has stirred both faith and skepticism. Did the walls of Jericho really fall at the blast of trumpets? Did Israelite tribes sweep across the land, toppling cities and seizing a promised homeland? Well, the book of Joshua recounts it vividly.
So the people shouted, and the trumpets were blown. As soon as the people heard the sound of the trumpet, the wall fell down flat, so that the people went up into the city, and they captured the city. Then they devoted all in the city to destruction.
But most modern scholars say, nope, didn't happen. They argue that the conquest is little more than just folklore, a national myth, woven centuries after the fact. But what if they're wrong? What if the key lies not in the Bible or in archaeology alone, but in the timeline we use to connect the two? So, hey, let's take a look, a bold new look into the conquest, one that rewinds history, resets the calendar of Egypt and Canaan, and makes the biblical story leap from the page into the dust and ruins of the ancient Near East. Hey, making these videos takes a lot of hard work and research, so don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. And be sure to head over to my website, JewsGodHistory.com, where you can access specially crafted podcasts that take you on a deep dive into Jewish history, thought, and culture. Check it out. So, what's the problem with the conquest of Canaan? Well, the mainstream view of history insists that the conquest story doesn't match archaeology. When scholars looked at cities like Jericho, Ai, and Hatzor, they didn't find destruction layers dating to the time traditionally assigned to Joshua, around the 13th century BCE. Jericho, according to conventional dating, was already a ghost town, and Ai had been abandoned centuries earlier. And Hatzor's great destruction, well, that happened either too early or far too late. So many concluded that the conquest just never happened. Perhaps the Israelites slowly emerged from within Canaan, blending with locals. Or maybe they were peaceful immigrants who gradually took root in the land. But here's the problem. What if the timeline itself is broken? What if the dates we've been using for Egypt's dynasties and Canaanite cities are off? Way off, even by centuries. What about resetting the clock? Now, imagine shifting the entire Egyptian chronology downward, even by hundreds of years. Pharaohs move, dynasties realign, and suddenly the archaeological record begins to synchronize with the biblical story in startling ways. This revised timeline suggests that the conquest didn't take place in the so-called Late Bronze Age, but earlier, actually in the Middle Bronze Age. And why does that matter? Because in the Middle Bronze Age, the evidence for destruction is in fact everywhere. Fortified cities, burned and abandoned, entire regions depopulated. And when the dust settles, the pattern looks eerily like the biblical account of conquest and settlement. Let's take Jericho and its famous walls. Well, archaeologists found that the walls of the ancient city did indeed collapse violently. The city was consumed by fire, Large storage jars filled with grain were left untouched, evidence of a short siege, followed by sudden destruction, with no time for plunder. Check out the biblical account.
They burned the city with fire and everything in it. Only the silver and gold and the vessels of bronze and of iron they put into the treasury of the house of the Lord.
But here's the twist. According to conventional chronology, that destruction happened around 1550 BCE, way too early for Joshua. But what if the timeline shifts? In that case, the destruction lands right in the window of the Israelite conquest. Suddenly, the evidence, dismissed for decades, lines up with the story of trumpets and tumbling walls. Then there's the mystery of Ai. See, the city of Ai, the ancient city of Ai, has long been a thorn in the side of biblical archaeology. The site traditionally identified as Ai, that is, Et Tel, was abandoned centuries before Joshua, and skeptics declared the whole story just a legend. But under this new reconstruction, the biblical Ai corresponds not to Et Tel, but to another nearby site, namely Khirbet el-Makatir, which was thriving just at the right time. Excavations were revealing fortifications, pottery, and destruction layers, matching the biblical description. Joshua 8 tells the story.
So Joshua burned Ai and made it forever a heap of ruins, as it is to this day.
So was Ai there all along, just hidden by a mistake in our timeline? Let's move on to the burning of the city of Hatzor. Hatzor, the so-called head of all those kingdoms, according to the Bible, was the largest city in Canaan. The Bible says that Joshua burned it to the ground. Excavations confirm that Hatzor suffered a massive fiery destruction. And archaeologist Yigael Yadin uncovered blackened stones, collapsed palaces, and statues smashed in ritual defiance. Joshua 11 records it.
And they struck them with the sword, and he burned Hatzor with fire.
Mainstream chronology places this fiery catastrophe centuries removed from Joshua's time. But with the clock reset, well, Hatzor's destruction falls right into place. And let's consider the general Canaanite collapse. This new view doesn't just explain one or two cities that fell. It explains a whole pattern. Because across Canaan, Middle Bronze Age cities fell in wave after wave of destruction. Walls collapsed, palaces were burned, populations vanished. Traditional history chalks all this up to vague invasions or migrating groups. But the biblical story gives a name: the tribes of Israel. There's another piece of the puzzle as well: Egypt. In the conventional timeline, Egypt's new kingdom dominated Canaan during Joshua's era. Pharaoh's armies patrolled the land. No small band of Israelites could possibly have conquered city after city. But in the revised timeline, Egypt was weak, was fragmented. It was reeling from upheaval. The pharaohs were struggling with invaders at home, leaving Canaan vulnerable. The Israelites, newly freed from bondage, had their moment. The book of Deuteronomy promises.
The Lord your God is He who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies to give you the victory.
So, what do we make of all this? Does archaeology finally confirm the conquest? Or does the debate simply shift from did it happen to when did it happen? For some, this reconstructed timeline restores the Bible's history. For others, it raises new questions. If we can move Egypt's dynasties around, how stable is any chronology? But one thing is certain: the ruins of Jericho, Ai, Hatzor, and many others are not silent. They still speak. The question is, are we listening with the right clock in hand? Bottom line, the conquest of Canaan may not be a myth after all. It may in fact be history, hidden in plain sight, just waiting for us to reset the calendar and hear the echoes of trumpets on Jericho's walls.